Elizabeth Jones joined the United Kingdom Independence Party, or UKIP, in 2010 and is an elected member of the party's National Executive Committee. She is now bidding to succeed Nigel Farage as the new leader of UKIP. Elizabeth most recently stood for election as a parliamentary candidate for Dartford in the 2015 general election, where she received 20% of the vote, catapulting UKIP into third place. Previously, she stood for election in the staunchly Labour Dulwich and West Norwood constituency, as well as in the 2012 Greater London Assembly and 2014 European Parliament elections. Alongside her opposition to military adventurism and interventionism, Elizabeth is a strong advocate of trade diplomacy as a means of conflict resolution, and has been particularly critical of the UK's poor trade relationships with Russia and Iran. In terms of domestic policy, Elizabeth identifies immigration as the UK's main issue and proposes to implement a zero net migration target to balance the numbers of people leaving the country with those entering. On a more personal level, Elizabeth is also a London-based solicitor and has campaigned for various local and international causes, ranging from a charity that helps to rehabilitate women enslaved by Islamic State to a bid to halt the demolition of an Art Deco cinema in Kensington. Welcome back to the English Hour on ANN Satellite Television. It's good to be here and good to have you with us. Our guest today is Elizabeth Jones. Elizabeth.
Hello there, William.
Well, really thank you for being with us. It's really great. And we have our three subjects. British politics, which is a lot to bite on, but British politics, migration, and then the issue of terrorism or extremism. But we're going to talk in regard to Britain, particularly about politics in regard to Britain. So we'll go to our first subject. The British political system is broken, the anti-establishment sentiment fueling the rise of UKIP and the outcome of the EU referendum is clear for all to see. The British public is not being listened to by the elite on the front benches of Parliament, and this is reflected in successive drops in voter turnout at general elections. Nothing illustrates the growing divide between the people and the political elite quite like the outcome of the June referendum, where in many instances voters defied the wishes of their MPs and voted decidedly in favour of Brexit. Britain is crying out for a what you see is what you get politician. UKIP leadership contender Elizabeth Jones stands for direct democracy and more frequent referendums to settle our most pressing debates. Could she be the one to kindle an unprecedented love affair between Westminster and the people? So Elizabeth, British politics, it drives me mad, actually, British politics. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying that much of the anger that the British people feel, they've been looking for an avenue to express their anger. And the Brexit vote was part of that. The UKIP vote is part of that, because the established parties, Liberal and Labour and Tory, have been singing from the same hymn book, and there is a sense of a wish to protest in some way. And that may be true, I don't know. What's your I mean, the rise of UKIP has your political party is remarkable, and the vote for Brexit was astonishing. I mean, what do you put it all down to?
What, the vote for Brexit?
The rise of UKIP, the vote for Brexit, is it one and the same? Or?
I think so, very much so. I think it's very much part of an anti-establishment movement. It's a rejection of the current political hierarchies in this country. For instance, if we look at David Cameron and his cabinet, it was basically a carbon copy of perhaps Eton's sixth form, writ large. So you've got a situation where many people feel locked out of the political processes, they feel locked out of political debate, they feel that they can never ever achieve high office in politics anymore. That, of course, has slightly changed with the new May regime, and of course she's in her honeymoon period at the moment, so let's see how she pans out. So I think a lot of people have felt completely disengaged, and you can see this quite clearly by voting figures. In local by-elections, you may get an average turnout of maybe 20-30% in some areas. Even with the general elections, the turnout is getting lower and lower and lower because people are just disengaged totally. You'll vote for an MP, that MP will have their 5-year term of office, and once they're in office, it's almost like a dictatorship. You have no means really of exerting any form of policy control over them or voting control over them because they're so tied in with their respective party political whip.
Our system, isn't it? It's an elected dictatorship in a sense, because we have a situation now in which the party system is so tight that what we're doing is electing a regime. We're electing a prime minister and his team, or her team in this case, Theresa May, who may or may not be very good. But, oh, heavens above, we didn't elect her. She just came. But whatever, the point is that they have total power because the whip system in British politics is so tight, that the party system is so tight, that they rule like a dictator for 4 years or whatever, and then the next one comes. And which is, I guess, the way we are doing it. That's wrong, you think?
I don't think it's wrong as such, but I think that as humans, we are always evolving intellectually. We always want to try something new. That's the part of our intellectual success as a species. We're always reaching out for the new idea, try something new ways of doing things. And I think that perhaps first past the post was ideally suited to a situation where we had 2 political parties only. And it was ideally situated in a situation where the population of the United Kingdom was at a certain level. Now, the population of the United Kingdom has grown significantly. We are very, very diverse now with regard to generations, gender, religion, ethnicity. So all this now, I think, is bubbling up in a very exciting way for change. And I think that we need to restructure the current political format. For instance, we need perhaps to consider, is first past the post still appropriate? Should perhaps we have a single transferable vote instead? I also want to think, perhaps we should be having more plebiscites. Should we have a system where perhaps every 2 years a major issue will be put to the people as in a referendum situation? So if there are, for instance, any issue about military invasion, I appreciate, or military involvement abroad, I think that really should go to the people and no longer the MPs, because I think there's been a huge loss of faith in our political system. Another problem we have as well, we can't really recall MPs. If you have an MP who never answers your emails, doesn't attend to casework, votes consistently against what you think is in your constituency's interests. For instance, at the moment, we have a situation in Wales particularly, and the North East particularly, where we have Labour MPs who voted staunchly they staunchly Remain, and yet their constituency members voted very significantly for Leave. Now, there's a huge political gap between them. Yes. And how is that resolved? Clearly, the constituent members are not being heard by their MP. Their MP will always follow the party whip and not the members. So I think
there wasn't a party whip on that.
No.
Was, I mean, so they followed what they regarded as their conscience. and yes, you could argue they're out of touch with their constituency. But we don't always have the populist measures. I mean, if we did, then we would have hanging in the UK. There's no question. We would hang those who committed murder, because that would be the majority view of the population of Britain. But we choose members of Parliament who are supposed to be older and wiser and maybe more. Anyway, this is our system. But I take your point nonetheless. I mean, there is a growing distance between Parliament and sort of out of touch feeling.
Well, very much so. And also you touched on these selection of candidates there. You're saying older and wiser. Well, are these people older and wiser? I think perhaps we should adopt an open primary system with the selection of candidates, so it isn't all closed doors, secret crony deals. So we have a fresher, perhaps more popular candidates going forward.
No,
so I think the candidate selection needs to be overhauled. We need to consider how we view voting anymore. Is first past the post still appropriate? Is single transferable vote better? And I do think that people should be offered the chance to engage in referendums. I think that would be tremendously popular, and it would re-engage the public. I think the public are disengaged from the political system.
So let's put you on the spot. You're saying, I mean, you're standing as for leader of the
Yes.
UK Independence Party, and you may well win. I mean, it's quite possible. Would you? Because I oddly am one of the few people probably that have actually read the Constitution of the UK, the rules of the UK Independence Party. They give enormous power to the leader, whomever that might be. And the leader has a role in putting forward policy. They do in most parties, political parties, to be honest. Would you favour an open primary system for the UK Independence Party's selection of candidates for Parliament?
Yes, definitely. I think
Really?
that's wholly appropriate. Yes.
Wow.
We are a party for direct democracy, power down and out to the people. It is vitally important that our members are engaged in the process, because we rely on our grassroots members to go out there to do the leafleting, the canvassing, to work really hard to achieve success.
But an open primary system means that but non-UKIP members could...
No, we wouldn't have the non-UKIP members. It would be, you'd have to be registered or have some affiliation with the party.
So
yeah.
right. So you're not talking American style
No,
primaries.
not yet. Not
all
yet.
All right.
That may come in the future, but I don't think we're quite ready for that at this stage.
Okay, I misunderstood you.
No, I do apologise. I should have made myself clearer.
But that said, I mean, what are your policies? Why not ask you this question? I mean, you personally, if you're laying out your stall, we have this British political system which is broken, and I think, I mean, from my perspective, what people are looking for in Parliament is that they're looking for sincerity from their politicians, and that goes way beyond honesty. I mean, you can be absolutely honest, but not answer the question, and not. They're looking for a level. It goes even beyond integrity. They're looking for people who what you see is what you get. And that's why. I mean, I was talking to somebody just the other day about this, but I mean, that's why politicians like Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage or, God forbid, our friend in America, are coming to the fore, because they're clear. You can see what you look. That's what he's saying. That's what he is, and we don't get that enough in British politics. What are you? I mean, what do you stand for? What is Elizabeth, as distinct from other candidates for UKIP leader?
Well, I'm for direct democracy. I'm for power back to the members. I think the members have been cut out of many of the decision-making processes and candidate selection processes within the party, and that power needs to be given back to them. They are the backbone and lifeblood of the party, and their voice has to be heard. I think if they were far more engaged, we would achieve far more than we have to date. So, back to the members.
Right. And And so, I mean, if we're talking about, we have the UK Independence Party has, I mean, you talked about PR indirectly anyway. The UK Independence Party has one MP who is a renegade or whatever. The Green Party similarly has, I believe, one MP. And yet they each had a substantial chunk of the political vote because of our system. You favour, clearly, or I assume you favour proportional representation.
I don't know so much about proportional representation. That really does need to be investigated. Perhaps something along the single transferable vote, so there's more preference given. But the problem is with proportional representation is that basically it does away with our constituency-based system. Now, the constituency-based system, of course, is very important for the people living within it. You have your MP there, you know where you stand, and of course it results in a stronger government. However, it is less representational of the people. Now, another area that I think does need to be investigated is what are we going to do with the House of Lords? We've got about 850 now, and it seems to me that the people who are now being made up to life peers are basically cronies. We all saw David Cameron's honours list, didn't we? Yes. Where I think Sam Cam's stylist was made up to, was it life peer? I've got some award. We had David Cameron's chauffeur. I mean, of course, these people are surely highly deserving people, but there are plenty of other people who've given their lives to charity work, who've given their lives to their community, and it seems very unfair in the entire system of life peerage. And I think perhaps we should actually call a halt to life peerages.
So we'll call a halt to the House of Lords then, or you want to elect the House of Lords?
No, I don't want to call a halt to the House of Lords. The House of Lords performs a very important role. It's a check and balance. It scrutinises legislation from the House of Commons. You certainly most definitely need that break, and you do need it to be staffed by highly competent people. So in the past, there seemed to be an idea that it was a pool of wisdom of former business people, former academics, senior judges who would use their lifetime experience and their intellect to scrutinise law. But that seems to have changed now, and it seems to be more cronies, donors, hangers-on, supporters. So it's becoming less of a pool of wisdom.
An independent commission to appoint members of the Lords, or
that may be a good idea. Actually, it may perhaps an independent commission, perhaps some form of election. But I think we need to stop the life peers now. I mean, they're getting about £25,000 tax-free per annum. There's a huge amount of money going on the House of Lords, and is it really doing the job it's meant to do? It's meant to be a break, an oversight, and a layer of extra wisdom. Are we really getting value for money for it? I really do question that. Perhaps we should have a system whereby, for the existing life peers, that they have a 2-year term, so that we can have a turnover of people. It's just a thought, but there are a lot of things that do need to be in the mix, that do need to re-engage the public, because I really think the public are simply turned off by current politics. It's all cronyism. It all seems to be tied up with the old Etonian lockdown. People feel they can't have their voice heard because we've got this 5-year dictatorship where we don't have perhaps referendums, we don't have proper MP recall. So if you're really, really dissatisfied with your MP, you could all get together and remove. There is no power to do that. Also, we have the situation with postal voting as well. There's been such significant fraud involved with postal voting. I think many people think, oh, well, what's the point in voting? The whole system's absolutely broken. I don't want to be part of it. I've lost interest. So I think perhaps if we reduce postal voting only to very special circumstances with regard to health or particularly travel arrangements, then I think that would engage people more. We really do need to engage people a lot more in the democratic process.
That's very interesting, actually. I think you may be right but we have huge numbers of postal voters, and very often people, there has been not so much fraud, but not intimidation, but encouragement by party workers who will go around and say, come on, vote for this one, and we'll watch them filling in the form. So it's not right, and it does need to be looked at. Thank you for that. We have to actually, there's a lot more to be said about British politics, but the constraints of time, we're going to move on. Well, we're still talking about British politics, but we're going to talk about the tough issues. And we'll start with migration, which is perhaps the toughest. Last year, the UN announced that the number of people displaced by conflict was at the highest level ever recorded. 1 in every 113 people on the planet is unable to return home. Angela Merkel's courageous pledge to allow up to 1 million refugees from the Syria conflict to settle in Germany has come in for heavy criticism, as asylum seekers from as far afield as Eritrea have tagged along. Moreover, in the aftermath of sexual harassment incidents in Germany and Sweden, and a spate of terrorist attacks in France, Belgium, and Germany, all linked to refugees, Europe's open door policy has triggered a landslide of debate regarding the compatibility of foreign cultures with those in the West. Across the pond, hawkish Donald Trump has repeatedly berated the West's supposed helplessness in the face of terror, with his strong anti-immigration, anti-Muslim sentiment, which has been alarming in its resonance with the American electorate. So migration, I mean, such an emotive subject, and we have the millions who have come under the free movement of labour. I say millions, I have no idea of the figures. I don't know whether anybody really does, because I'm not sure they're properly counted. But there are significant numbers of people who have come. If you believe in a world without frontiers, the European ideal is certainly a Europe without frontiers. I mean, that's not a bad thing, is it, really? The world we have to move to, kind of melting pot world, and people come in.
All things being equal, yes, that should be a successful economic strategy, but things aren't equal, and we have great disparities with regard to economic success in respective countries, great disparities with regard to education and aspiration, and we have we don't necessarily have a very good fit culturally with many people who perhaps want to migrate to the United Kingdom.
So you think that we should hunker down, and I mean, our Prime Minister is going to take her time about negotiating this thing. It's going to, and she may negotiate something that's going to be much the same as the European Union at present. I mean, she may negotiate a situation where we continue to have the free movement of labour. We don't know. She claims that she will be tighter on migration. But you would like to see that cut to what? You want to send back all the Poles and the many East Europeans that are, I mean, now living here, or what would you like to see done?
Well, what I would like to see on a future basis would be to have more or less zero net migration, with perhaps a leeway of 10,000 either way, so that superstar entrepreneurs, superstar scientists, cultural performers can always come to the United Kingdom. And how we would achieve that? Well, obviously we need to leave the European Union, so we don't have the freedom of movement. And also we have the immigration rules 2016, the Immigration Act 2016, which already supplies a point-style system for people entering the United Kingdom.
So you want that applied to Europeans?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, you want a level playing field for whether for Commonwealth citizens, non-Commonwealth citizens, Europeans.
Exactly, yes.
You wouldn't give preferential treatment to the Commonwealth?
No, no.
You would give, under the point system, you would give preferential treatment to people who have family here and so on. I mean, obviously, because that is a factor. But then to have zero net migration, or something approaching zero net migration, I mean, what about the swathes of people from countries like Syria? I know we're taking very few very modest numbers, but the refugees,
Well, we've got a long-standing obligation to support and assist refugees, and we always have. In the 1890s, we supported the Litvaks, as the Lithuanian Jewish people who were fleeing the pogroms in Eastern Europe. We gave succour to those communities. In the 1970s, we gave succour to the Asians fleeing from Idi Amin's Uganda. So we've always done that, and we always will. We do have certain international treaty obligations which we would support, of course.
But those are large numbers. The Ugandan Asians, for example, which you mentioned, that was a large number of people when you had a refugee crisis because of Idi Amin. I mean, you're saying that we would, I mean, the world is facing a refugee crisis with refugees from Syria, for example, and we have a lot of listeners to this particular channel in Syria. Refugees from Libya. Well, actually, no, it's not so much refugees. Refugees from sub-Saharan Africa traveling through Libya. You could say we had a responsibility. I mean, we were certainly the ones that were, not you personally, but our government was responsible for the decision. It was in the lead on the decision to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, which resulted in the instability in Libya. Maybe rightly or wrongly, but that aside, you could say that we had a responsibility for some of this flow of refugees to Europe. You reckon that we should therefore take these people?
We can take them in limited numbers, but I don't think we can take in huge swathes of people. It's simply not feasible. It absolutely is not feasible. We've got to consider the infrastructure of this country as well. We've got to consider the social stability of this country as well. So I understand David Cameron has committed himself to about 20,000 Syrian refugees, and they're the people coming direct from the camps, not the people who've made the journey through Europe, which is right and proper because those people should be seeking asylum in the first safe country they've entered. So I think that David Cameron's approach is appropriate. Furthermore, we really should give great thanks to Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq and Turkey, because they have taken on huge numbers of refugees. And I understand that they've housed them safely and appropriately. And I don't think enough credit is given to those countries for the great support that they've given in this crisis.
They've housed them safely and appropriately. Some camps are very different from others, and refugees are in terrible conditions in some situations. I mean, in Turkey, some of the camps are atrocious, and in winter the conditions are horrendous. I mean, I know this because we've had interns who've gone and worked there. I mean, the conditions can be. Then there's a huge disparity in situations. Some refugees in Lebanon have a very hard time. That aside, and certainly Cameron has committed to 20,000, but 20,000 over like 4 years or something. It's quite a modest number each year. So, I mean, there, but for the grace of God, go you and I. We do need surely to try and accept more of these people. Don't we have sorry to hammer this point, but don't we have a compassionate obligation as fellow human beings to hold out a hand to these people?
You're right. I mean, we have given a huge amount in aid to this situation, and I think we will continue to do so. Perhaps one way forward may be for there to be external refugee settlement, perhaps maybe Tunisia, if we were to enter into a trilateral agreement with France, Tunisia. It would have to be overseen and assisted by the UN in order to have proper and appropriate refugee settlement in Tunisia. It would significantly help the Tunisian economy. Perhaps we could have French and British, perhaps civil servants there managing the system. And I think that would be ideally located. It's on the Mediterranean coast, so if there are people travelling, making that perilous journey across the Mediterranean Sea, they can be picked up and safely housed in Tunisia.
Interesting. So, so you would stop these, because at the moment, of course, our rescue boats are going in to within 12 miles of the Libyan coast and picking up these people, including British ships, British, not merchant navy, British Royal Navy ships are going in. You would want that stopped, or at least stop bringing them across to Europe and start taking them to Tunisia.
I mean, it would help the Tunisian economy significantly. So there'd be a big boost for the Tunisian economy. It would also be less traumatic, similar climate, similar people, similar cultural values. So I think perhaps it would be a better fit.
Yeah, the Tunisians might not be.
Well,
happy.
Well, the Tunisians are already, I think they're already accommodating about 55,000 Libyan refugees. So I think that they do already have in place some level of administration to process such a situation.
Well, that's a radical idea. Okay, let's move back to while we're on the refugee issue, let's move back to the free movement of people within Europe. Because it's one thing talking about refugees, and I think we do have a compassionate obligation to them, but they are a minority, and as we said, the large level of migration is from Europe, and is under the free movement of labour, and that's there we are talking millions, not thousands. Indeed, migration from the rest of the world is minute compared to the migration under the free movement of people. Really.
Well, hang on. In December 2015, the net migration figure is 333,000. From the EU, it was 184,000. Outside EU, it's 188,000. Those are the official figures. So that's the situation with the flow with the UK. But those are the official figures. Unofficially, I can't possibly comment on it. I think only Sainsbury's or Tesco could comment based on the amount of food sold.
Yes, I think it can't be. That was 2013. I mean, looking at the...
That was December 2015.
2015?
Yes.
Well, then they have to be wrong, don't they? They can't be right.
Oh, no, I'm sure they'll need readjusting, of course.
No, readjusting, that doesn't make any sense at all. That's 100 and...
No, the net migration figure of after you've deducted people coming into the country, people leaving the country, it was December 2015. The last quartile figure, I believe, was 333,000.
From Europe?
No, that's the whole figure. Yeah. And from Europe, I believe it was 184,000.
For the month?
No, I think
the quarter.
I think it would have been. I think it would have been for that quarter, or perhaps for the year. I think it was the year actually, but that was the end of year quarter.
If it's for the year, then that's impossible, isn't it? I mean, you just have to look at the. It has been much higher, from Europe. I mean, anyway.
But again, we can never really know the accurate figure. We can only have some idea about based on national insurance numbers being released, amount of food being sold by the major supermarkets, really, if you want to have a really accurate figure.
So, but that aside, the free movement of labour is quite delightful because it does mean that we can go to Europe and work in Europe. It means that it is... ideologically, it's a better world, isn't it? It's a safer world if people from Europe move here and we move there, and we feel able to have a community in which we can live and work freely, and everybody is friendly with the next guy. I mean, is it not? Why do you want to totally stop you don't want to totally stop the free movement of labour? You said you had these elite groups that
of course, I mean, that's what we do under the Immigration Act 2016, the immigration rules. There is a visa tier system, which is basically a point system, similar to the Australian point system. So, and also it applies for unskilled labour. If you have a big need for, farm labourers, fine, you can have a visa to come in for that.
Ordinary people then would be no longer able to...
Well, it depends if there's an economic need. I'm sure they would be employed. They would, of course, come over.
And those, we didn't really hit on this, but those that are here, already, and we're talking easily a couple of million. I mean, for sure, whatever. I'm sure it's very substantial because they just have to look around. Those that are here already, you send them back?
I wouldn't necessarily send them back. It all depends on whether they're a good fit for the economy. Obviously, if they're paying into the tax system, abiding by our laws, and fine, stay. Of course, you'd be welcome.
So if they're taxpayers, they can stay?
Well, if it's a good fit for the economy, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, so you mean a good fit for the economy? You mean nurses and doctors and things like that? You don't mean, you mean anybody, flower pickers and the lot? Or
well, there's always a need for. People tend to forget there's a big need for unskilled labour at certain times. We've got agricultural produce that needs picking or needs to be administered to. Cattle, as you say, we've got the famous fruit pickers. All of this is time relevant, seasonal, and every now and then we do need large numbers of people to come in and attend to these tasks. And of course, they will be paid. So it's a vital part of the economy.
But
I mean, the counter to that also we've got to accept is that, all right, I understand the British prison population is about, 80-odd thousand. A significant proportion of that comprises people born outside the United Kingdom. It's a huge expense. So we've got the prison system, which is a huge expense, the criminal justice system, a huge expense. The lower criminal courts are often chogged up with applications from the various European Union countries under the European arrest warrant for people from this country to be taken back to whichever country they came from. And in the past, we had something called judicial discretion, so the judge could look through the case paper and think, this is such a trivial crime, forget it, Pavlov's days, forget it, it's too much palaver. But now that's been taken away. So you'll have ridiculous crimes, well, to us they're ridiculous crimes, where someone's stolen 50p, someone's stolen a baseball cap. Well, so you want to go through this entire hugely expensive process, which hogs up a huge amount of our court time, hogs up a huge amount of our civil service time for, 50p.
So you would stop the European arrest warrant? Or you'd stop?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, there you go. It really is a difficult subject, but interesting discussion. We're going to have to move on because we're going to talk about, well, terrorism and extremism, which is quite a subject by itself. So thank you, Elizabeth. We'll move to the next topic. Yes, yeah. It's been almost 15 years since George W. Bush gave his famous Axis of Evil speech, in which he pledged to eradicate the global threat of terrorism, and then kept his word with an invasion of Iraq in 2003, with Britain's Premier Tony Blair at his side. More than a decade later, the former head of Britain's intelligence services finally concluded that the war in Iraq had actually increased the threat of terrorism in the UK. With Britain's European neighbours still reeling from a series of tragic attacks over the past couple of years, there can be no doubt that Western nations are in desperate need of a new approach to counter terrorism. Extremism, terrorism, well, let's define extreme. I mean, we could start from the beginning and say extremism has always been with us. Mm-hmm.
We had Patty Hearst. Do you remember Patty Hearst?
No, I do.
Kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army in the early 1970s?
Yes, in America.
She became an extremist.
Yeah.
We've had the Animal Liberation Front, the IRA, the Provisional IRA, the Real IRA. We've had Red Action. We've had the Socialist Workers' Party, Socialist Workers' Revolutionary Party. It's a long history of quiet extremism.
But then you're bracketing in, I mean, the Socialist Workers' Party one, and then the Red Army at the other. I mean, they're very different. The Socialist Workers' Party, I remember meeting years ago the leader of the Socialist Workers' Party, and Vanessa Redgrave was, in the Socialist Workers' Party. But I mean, okay, they weren't. I mean, they may have talked about violent revolution, but they weren't going to go out and pop a bomb down the High Street.
Well,
right?
let's not forget, was it about 1993, 1994? Red Action did actually bomb Harrods.
Okay, but I mean there have been extreme
There have been.
groups.
And then, of course, we've got the Soho bomber, Mr. Copeland,
Yeah.
a one-man band of extremism.
No,
Bombs in Brixton,
Yeah.
bombs in Soho.
No, a horrid white extremist of
Yeah,
the
exactly.
worst kind. And yes, a terrible bigot, actually. And he is, he represents a kind of racism that is present of the Ku Klux Klan and this kind of thing. I mean, that horrible approach. But so we have this. We have as you rightly point out, we have white extremism. We have what people call Muslim extremism.
And we have left extremism.
Yeah. Do you? Okay. So, but what we're talking about really are people like Mr. Copeland or the 9/11 bombers or whatever. We're talking about violent extremists who resort to violence, and we need to protect ourselves against them. They are often inspired by ideologists, and it's interesting that 4 of the ideologists followed by ISIS, Daesh, are British, one of whom has just been jailed quite prominently.
Oh, would that be the
Anjem
Chowdhury?
Yeah. But it took a very long time for the British legal system to catch up. Well, he has been prosecuted before, but finally he has been jailed and convicted, and I presume that conviction will hold. But it's astonishing that Britain is the source for ideologists who are the key ideologists in many instances, followed by some of the most extreme people in the world. Something's wrong with our society, presumably. Something's wrong with us.
Well, do you really think so? I mean, I have a different take on this political extremism, and I think that I've often thought about this at some length. I think it's male competitive behaviour.
Really?
Yeah, it's a form of competing cultures, and it's, you know how you get young men, they can be very competitive toward each other, they're fighting over this girlfriend, or don't you look at my girlfriend. I think there's a lot of that in it. So I don't think it's alien behaviour. I think it is innate to our human nature to sometimes express ourselves in an extreme way. I'm not justifying it at all. And with regard to Anjem Chowdhury, I think it's outrageous that it took how long it did to actually get a prosecution together against him. And that really is a failing of the current current desperate fear of being seen to be racist, desperate fear of being seen to be Islamophobic, and kowtowing to the current fashion of multiculturalism.
You're a pro-integrationist.
Yes, I am.
So you're against, for example, faith schools?
I'm not against faith schools, provided they're within the ambit of the law and they're following the national curriculum. I understand that many people have a great deal of confidence in faith schools and believe that they offer a better quality of education than mainstream schools. It all depends really on who's funding it. If it's entirely privately funded, why should I raise any objection whatsoever?
No, I'm not talking about that, but state-funded.
State-funded, well, you've got to be very careful with state funding because that's money coming out of our hard-earned salaries and wages. And clearly we want to produce a product that is an educated youth who will go forward and be a credit to our country and a credit to our society, who's fully integrated and feels that they are a positive member of Britain. And we want to make sure that any schooling that they go through promotes this.
But you're not against state funding of...
Well, it's a bit of a difficult one. I think it does need further examination because at some level, why should the state support a variety of different religions, which the vast majority of the population don't? I think the vast majority of the population are quite secular. So why should they support the funding of faith schools?
The majority of the population is secular rather than Christian.
Yeah, when I say Christian, I mean secular Christian, you know, got secular Muslim, secular Jewish, you know, that they're notionally attached to these religions, perhaps through birth, through parentage, but don't practice them and perhaps don't really know that much about the faith.
Yes, you're probably right. Depending on your perspective, that might be a sad thing or not, but I mean, you're probably right. We live in a secular society, and we have religious extremism. We have surely a broken society. I mean, there is a lack of a sense of belonging for many young people.
Yes, I'm sure many young people must feel quite desperate at times. But I don't think it's just to do with religious parameters or extremist political ideology. It's the very facts of life. I mean, many youngsters can't even hope to buy a house now. I mean, at one stage in the past, when I was a youngster, I would think, well, I could buy a house. I only need 3 times my salary. I can go out and get a mortgage. I can actually buy a house. I can get a little flat somewhere, start my life. It's simply not open to youngsters these days. You know, the house price is so high now. I don't see how anyone can possibly plan a future for themselves.
Yes, it's true.
So a lot of opportunities that were available perhaps to people of my generation aren't necessarily now available to the youth of today. So I can understand that they may feel a bit that they're cut out from society. They're never going to achieve what the parents achieved even.
Yeah. No, I remember. It made me smile because I remember in the Europe debate, the head of the World Bank, a French lady, came on British television to tell us that leaving Europe would be disastrous, and one of the reasons she laid out was that the house prices would fall.
Well, I think that's a positive thing.
I know. Well, I thought to myself, my goodness, you've just spoken to the British population and tried to persuade them to leave Europe because she's so out of touch with popular thinking. But anyway, that aside, yes, you're right. I mean, house prices, homes are out of reach for the ordinary.
Yeah, very much
person.
so.
But that doesn't. There's a big leap to that, and picking up a gun and being an extremist and going and murdering somebody. And there is part of the problem is this feeling of disengagement with society. And you're right, maybe you can put down some of it down to the macho male, but it's the macho dysfunctional male that has lost a sense of belonging to society. I mean, we do have a problem that needs addressing here in Britain, surely.
I think we do, yes, and I think that's largely caused by multiculturalism because people haven't got the courage to face up to these issues. I think there needs to be a much tougher stance taken against hate preachers, imams who are encouraging anti-British feeling, encouraging attacks on minority groups or other Muslim sects that the imam doesn't belong to. I think that has to be stopped. They have to be prosecuted and stopped.
Now, Britain has its own prevent strategy, which has been, some would argue, millions upon millions of pounds wasted in promoting extremism rather than... Because we have one of the... For example, let me just take one example. One of the pillars of the prevent strategy has been to encourage teachers to report on children, which is kind of divided...
Oh, we have the famous... cooker bomber incident from that, don't we? Where a 4-year-old was apparently reported for, I think, what was the 4-year-old drawing a cucumber and would ask what it was. Oh, it's a cooker bomber. So, and I think that ended up being a report. So yes, of course, it's probably a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. I'm sure if it's a government-organised body, of course, it's going to be wasting millions of pounds. I think it costs about £40 million per annum. But then, of course, the plus side against that, I think we do have much better relations with all groups in our country than appears in France. We haven't had the attacks that have happened in France, but that may be to do with we have better CCTV or perhaps we have better reporting. And let's not forget, this is a very important issue, that the reason why we haven't had so many, well, very few attacks in this country is because the very communities that these youngsters come from are reporting the activities to the police. They're the people, all the information is coming from the communities.
So, I mean... in a way, I wonder to myself sometimes, do you represent the democratic alternative to violent extremism? I mean, if we're in a democratic country,
Yes.
we had UKIP and the Brexit vote, if we were, which was a way of expressing protest, if we'd been in a non-democratic country, and the avenue to thump the establishment wasn't there, then we might have resorted to revolution or whatever.
Yeah, possibly, yes.
Because as was the case in the Arab Spring, but there are huge divisions in society now, and they are graver than they've been since Victorian times. I mean,
I don't think that's the case. I mean, come on. So? In Victorian times, if you went down to the east of London, you'd see lots of young girls. Child prostitution was, well, I wouldn't say necessarily accepted, but it certainly wasn't hidden. So you had the gin mothers, you had the feckless class. No, I'm sorry, things have moved on significantly. We simply do not have the economic divisions that existed in the Victorian era. But then the upside, of course, the Victorian era was a huge period of creativity and economic advancement.
But we have, all right, point taken, but compared to my youth, certainly...
But look, no one starves to death in this country. Most people can get a roof over their head, even if they may not ever be able to own their own roof. Most people here have access to education if they so wish. So things have improved immeasurably since the Victorian era, immeasurably.
Okay, but they've gone backward in many ways in the last decade or two. I mean, you have to admit that. If you look, we have food banks. We have you go through London, you'll see not every other street, but you'll see frequently. You'll see pawnbrokers. In my youth, you'd never see a pawnbroker. The level, the subclass, the poverty, the sleeping on the streets, which is not just a London phenomenon, but every town in the United Kingdom. People live with a level of poverty and a level of anger that we have not seen in Britain in my lifetime. This is new.
I can't agree with you. If you go back to the 1970s, we had the 3-day week, we had power shortages, we had repeated strikes. I mean, things were a lot worse. A lot worse.
Of personal poverty.
Well, you had people who were, striking. I mean, look at it was Grunwick, wasn't it? Do you remember the very famous Grunwick strike? They lost.
Yes, but you might. I mean, if there was the miners' strike or whatever.
Miners lost, of course, big time.
But during that strike, while they were striking, there was those who were striking had grave poverty. But now we have a subclass in Britain that are very, very poor.
Well, I don't think there's any real need. Right, I don't think there's any real need to be very, very poor. We do have a benefit system. I agree. It may not be the most perfect vehicle, but it is there. There is emergency housing. Again, not perfect by any means, but it is there. And another crying shame we've got several million vacant properties in this country. Vacant properties. Decent houses that are completely and utterly vacant. These aren't being used at all. There needs to be a register of vacant properties so they can be used and brought up to scratch so people can live in them. It's a complete waste.
Interesting. I mean, I certainly feel that there is... I feel that our society is less happy than I've seen it in a long time, and certainly in my lifetime. And I feel angrier about social conditions in Britain than I have ever felt. That's for sure. I mean, no, there were periods in the miners' strike and so on, that, as you rightly point out, that one felt a sense of worry and concern, but other than that, I haven't felt as upset about social conditions in Britain as I do today. Now, why is that? Maybe I'm getting a false picture, but I'm unhappy, and I see this. We started talking about extremism. I see extremism as a product of any broken society. You know, it is. Mind you, it's an
But
international phenomenon.
we've had Irish Republican extremism for
Yes.
decades. I'm sure you must have memories of all the mainland
I do,
bombings,
yes, it was
and they were
much worse.
very serious. I mean, people talk about the Islamic extremism now. I mean, it really can't hold a candle to the Irish Republican extremism, where we were under real threat. I know several people who were, obviously, luckily, thank God, they weren't blown up, but were actually within shouting distance of these bombs going off. It's very, very serious. And we forget that. We forget the absolute terror of the 1970s of having this looming over us. And thank God, thank to the Good Friday Agreement, for whatever, it's not a perfect vehicle, but that seems to have quietened down quite considerably now, thank God. And just as that problem subsides, we now have another problem that comes up, which I don't think is as serious as the Irish problem by any means whatsoever.
Okay.
It seems to be a very young problem, it's a young male problem.
You would think that if this can be resolved, I mean, and you highlighted multiculturalism as a problem.
Yes.
So, just to be clear, your recipe for dealing with extremism is, and you highlighted the need to basically deal with the extremist preachers.
Yes, very important.
Extremism in the mosques.
Yes.
And beyond that, that is what you want done.
Extremism in the mosques, extremism in the Islamic faith schools. So we've got to question whether it's appropriate that the majority secular taxpayers should actually be subsidising faith schools when we have perfectly decent state schools that are not affiliated to any religion. And people then perhaps can go to Sunday school to keep up with their faith, of course, you know, in their own time, at their own expense. Perhaps that's the answer. The other way forward, well, I think there is maybe perhaps some element of foreign policy. I don't want to actually say that is a hat to hang, a peg to hang that hat on. However, foreign policy has been rather detrimental. I don't think our involvement in Iraq or involvement, I guess you say, in Libya, it was particularly helpful.
No, clearly.
It's not helpful at all.
Yeah.
However, the issues of the rise of Islamic fundamentalism or extremism arose before our entry into those two countries. It's been around, I would say, probably since about 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. So, yeah, the imams, the schools, and I think there needs to be more economic hope.
Yes.
It's about economic hope, so people can think, you know, youngsters can think, well, God, my parents had a house, I can't even get a house, I can't even get a flat. How am I ever going to get married and have a family? You know, these are concerns that a lot of youngsters have and have to be addressed.
So you, presumably, if UKIP came to power, which is in theory a possibility, then you would have a revised house building program or something?
Yes, most definitely, yes.
Okay.
Also, we want to focus on utilising brownfield sites, and we would hope to have a house building programme. No buy-to-let, that's the end of buy-to-let. I think that creates, none of these houses would ever go to any buy-to-lets. They'll just go straight to people who are going to live in them as proper family units. Because the housing crisis is a very significant problem.
So second homes you would be against then?
Well, not now. I mean, the government will not be, our house building programme will not be building any second homes. They're not going to go to buy-to-let. They'll just go to families or go to single people or go to the elderly. You've got another problem, the other end of the spectrum, what with the cutbacks in legal aid in this country, you're going to be coming across many, most likely to be women, middle-aged women, who are going to be homeless. They've not gone through the courts, they've not got settlements, they haven't had legal advice, just get divorced and walk away. And what are they going to get in their retirement? Probably end up homeless. So another class of people that will need to be considered with accommodation.
Well, Elizabeth, now, a last word. Our time's running out. I'm not, the viewers of this channel are not the voters and the members of UK Independence Party, but you are setting out your store as a potential leader of UK Independence Party. If you had to say, give us your, what's your unique selling point? What is uniquely Elizabeth? Why should we all perhaps some of us are members of UKIP that are looking at this. Certainly on YouTube, some members of UKIP will be looking at this, and they'll be voting. Why should they vote for Elizabeth?
Well, they should vote for me because I've contested more elections than any other candidate. I've garnered far more votes for UKIP than any other candidate. I'm the professional managerial candidate, and I want to completely reshape the party, make it far more efficient, far more financially viable, and move it forward to electoral success in the local elections in 2017 and the general election in 2020. It's all about Westminster. We have to get MPs, otherwise we'll end up as no more than a pressure group. So focus has to be Westminster, Westminster, Westminster.
Thank you. Elizabeth Jones, thank you very much for being with us today on ANN. That's really great.
Thank you very much, William. Thank you for having me.
Well, that was interesting. My goodness, and Elizabeth Jones may well be the next leader of the UK Independence Party. And because there are only 5 candidates for this position, and it'll be extremely interesting to see the outcome. And the UK Independence Party is important in British politics. It matters because it's part of that whole safety valve, if you like, that was represented by the Brexit vote and so on. And even though the Brexit vote has it's divided our society, nonetheless, it is a way forward for a democracy if within that democracy you can express your frustration or bash the establishment in some way. And thank God for it. If we lived perhaps in some of the countries that have endured the Arab Spring, then we would have had no recourse other than street violence and social upheaval on a massive scale. If we wanted to change our government or to send a message to our governments that we were not happy with them. So it is a blessing, perhaps, that the Western nations have democracy. And I do hope that our cousins in the Middle East will one day enjoy the same freedoms. That said, we were talking about migration. Migration, what an issue. It's one that disturbs us all because none of us have an easy, instant answer that can deal with the migration issue. Net migration will be goodness. It'll go on and on for years before we reach zero net migration, which is what Elizabeth aspires to. Can we do it? Can we get there? Should we get there? More to the point, you will have your own opinions. Perhaps migration itself is a safety valve, and should we be aspiring to zero net migration in a country like Britain, or should we be taking larger numbers of migrants? I mean, you may have your own opinions on this, and do email us at the English Hour with your opinions. We value them. Then we talked about extremism. We have failure in the West, and Elizabeth was very right to point out the fact that the Irish Republican Army in the years of my youth were much more violent than any extremists we see today. The bombings in London were beyond comprehension on their scale, and not just in London, but in other cities of the United Kingdom. We had extreme violence. So yes, in a way, things are better. But we do have a problem. We have a society that is not quite working, and Elizabeth said multiculturalism is the problem, but you look at societies that have tried, their governments have tried to move for integrationist policies like France. France, you could argue, has a considerably worse situation with regard to violence, extremism than Britain. Indeed, Elizabeth said as much. So there has to be an answer, and we haven't found it yet. But certainly our young people need to have a sense of belonging, and we need to look to be able to provide that for them. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being our guests on ANN Television, and thank you for hearing what Elizabeth Jones had to say. Look forward to our next time together. Thank you.